You feel like you're really close, no? Yeah, can you see the board? Or do you want to move back just a step and to your right a little bit? Or?
I'm too close. I know.
You like where you are? Okay. I can't see anything, Orlando. Yeah, let's move this back a little bit if we can. And the Sukkah, I'm not doing this. Before we do anything, before we start, this is the first of the series of classes. It'll take about 6 to 8 months. We will go through all of Judaism. You will know more coming out of this. Move back just a skosh, Orlando, just because it's so bright. Thank you. You will know more than a first-year rabbinic student, other than Hebrew. Okay, and rabbis as well. Before we study, we always light a candle. The reason is that it is a holy activity, and it says in the book of Proverbs, "Nishmat Adam Ner Adonai," that the soul of the human being is the candle flame of God. And so we light the candle and say a blessing about study. Before we do that, though, because we're in the Sukkah, okay? So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shem Lord of the universe is sanctified, commanding us to dwell in this. There's nothing better than dwelling than learning, right? We don't shake the lulav or the etrog tonight. It's nighttime. But we do study and we do invite our guests. Be seated, holy guests. Be seated, exalted guests. Be seated, guests of faithfulness. Be seated in the shade of the Holy One. Blessed be He in His presence, the Shekinah. Tonight we invite Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David to come to be part of our learning. Just Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Aaron, and David to come study with us and be with us. The 7 patriarchs that correspond to Sphira. We're going to learn about that in a few months. But then we light a candle. So always study is a holy activity. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. You have handouts. I think they're available online too. I'm going to make this a little easier on myself.
Poked in the eye.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's great for dinners, but when you're standing here, it's a little bit much. So we'll cut a little bit of our pomfrons. All right. So let's talk about Judaism. Let's talk about what this is. Tonight we're just going to go over some basic things about creation and God, and we'll see what we get, but we'll see what we'll do. And whenever you have a question, just chime it in, yell it in, do whatever you need to do. You have handouts. I think they're also online. So let's talk first about the theology of Judaism as opposed to Catholicism, which is the root of all Christianity. Besides the whole Jesus thing, okay, besides that part, the primary difference is faith versus action. In both traditions, we want everyone to act well and to have faith. But in Catholicism, if you act well, that's great. But if you have faith, whatever you've done, the priest can forgive you, right? You can do that and be forgiven. In Judaism, that's not the case. We need to do the action of tshuva, of making things right. Moreover, it says in the Yerushalmi Talmud, it actually says that God said, better that you should not believe in me and treat each other well. That treating each other well is more important than belief. So we're very much about action more than faith. We want both. Catholicism believes that your faith will lead to action. Our belief is that your action will lead to faith. Okay, so that's just a primary difference. The skeleton key, actually before that, this is the Bible. Okay, we call it a Tanakh. It is not called in Judaism the Old Testament. Why? Because that implies there's a New Testament, a new Bible. And since we don't accept that as our text, we accept that they do. We don't accept it as a Brit Chadash, as a new covenant. This is what it is. And the actual term for it is not even Bible. It's actually called a Tanakh. And it's an acronym. T stands for Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible. N stands for Nevi'im, which means prophets, the prophetic section. And K stands for Ketuvim, the writing section. So the prophets are Jeremiah, Ezekiel, etc. And Ketuvim is Psalms, Proverbs, Job, the writings and things like that. We call it the Tanakh. Okay, it's codified in the Talmud, and it's a different order in the Ketuvim section than it is used now. It's a slightly different order. I'm going to be recommending a lot of books when we get back to the temple next week, when we start doing classes in the temple, and showing you a lot of books. It's just a little bit complicated to do that in a sukkah. But this is really the text from which all things come, especially the Torah. We believe the Torah was written by God. I mean, it's through the hand of Moses, but the mouth of God. This is the root of all Judaism. It is the root of everything in terms of that. And it needs to be studied in Hebrew. You know, when I taught at Loyola Marymount, people would ask me questions about the Christian scriptures. I wouldn't answer them. They would say, why don't you answer them? And I would say, because I don't speak Greek. And every time you translate from one language to another, there's an automatic interpretation. To study this, you need to study it in Hebrew, or study with someone who knows the Hebrew. Now, I like this particular edition. This is published by Masora Publishing, or Art Scroll. And the reason is it has the Hebrew on one side and the English on another. And it's straight from Hebrew to English, as opposed to the King James or the NSV. They've gone through 7 translations to get to the English. So it says differently. Go ahead.
Is the Tanakh the same for conservative, reform?
Tanakh is the Tanakh. The Hebrew is the Hebrew.
Okay,
But the translation is going to be different.
that's what I'm asking. It is
This is a pure Hebrew, straight Hebrew to English translation.
Okay.
Okay, and that's why I really like it. JPS also does one. But it's really wonderful, and you know, there's commentary on the bottom, but the commentary should be studied about. You don't necessarily just take what the commentators say. That's their take on it. This is the text. But here's an example. Go ahead.
How many different translations are there? Many? Or?
Many. Okay. Remember, that goes from Hebrew, and then it goes into Aramaic and Greek and Latin, and gets into Spanish, German. Eventually, it gets to English. 7 generations down. So here's an example. It says you'll read a translation in the NSV or the King James, and it says that God got angry. And yet, the Maimonides, the Rambam, says, the greatest rabbi ever, says, no, God doesn't ever, if you see anger in the Torah, it's you, not God. Okay? Well, those 2 statements are very different if you're reading a translation that says anger. It doesn't say God got angry in the Torah. What it does say is that God's nostrils flared. I'm passionate, not because I'm necessarily. Or it says you should be scared and be in fear of God. Well, the word yirat, which is the word that's often translated as fear, actually means awe. Now, there is a sense of being overwhelmed with fear when there's awe, but it's not. It's a very different understanding, isn't it? If you're reading an English translation and it says the fear of God, and it actually says Yirat Hashem, that really means the awe of God. Very different. But you only see it when you start exploring what the text really says. And if you look at your syllabus, and this is based on a class I taught at Loyola as well as American Jewish University, before that when I was still University of Judaism, you will see that a lot of time is spent on the Bible, especially on the Torah, because it's the root of everything. And you're going to see certain stories recapitulated over and over and over. So translation is really, it's important to understand that the Tanakh is not what people call the Old Testament, because you really need to study it in the language. So that's our Tanakh. Now, the skeleton key that unlocks all of Judaism, and let me back up a little bit. If you study in a Reform or even most conservative places, what ends up happening is, what ends up happening is that you study again with an agenda through a filter. And some of the deepest part of Judaism, the deepest parts, are lost in Reform Judaism, where it's basically Protestant Christianity with a little Hebrew. Okay, let's be honest. People say, what is our temple? Our synagogue is Jewish. Whereas one person, no, it's Judaism. It's the Muslims until 250 years ago. What has happened is in the Reform and conservative, a lot of the essence of religious depth has been, and why would anyone I should do anything. I think there's a way to do a
Thank you.
Okay. The skeleton key, all of these, is 4-letter name Yod Hey Vav. Okay. Silent. The Vav can be a V, a W, an O, or an U, and the Hey can be an H or sound.
That's how you get like Jehovah, for example.
That's why you get that's how you get Yahweh or Jehovah or Yoho Woho or Yuhu Woohoo. Okay, then you laugh, but there's actually meditations from the Kabbalim, especially Cordovero of blessed memory, permutations of the vowel sounds. But since we don't know what the name is, we don't pronounce it because Bob might be offended if I called him Obabo, okay, or Ububu,
So if you're reading the Torah in temple, you pronounce that.
Hashem or Adonai.
I see, which is different. Than,
Okay, Hashem means the name.
Ah,
Adonai means my master. So rather than saying I'm pronouncing it wrong, I don't want to offend anyone, right? We say Hashem.
okay. I learn something every day. I just,
Okay, so now you know Hashem and Adonai are used interchangeably, but it doesn't say Hashem, it doesn't say Adonai, it says Yud, He, Vav, and Hey. Okay, so this is a big piece of what everything. This is the key that's going to unlock all of Judaism. As we go through the classes, you're going to see that the entire structure of the Siddur is based on this name. That all of your prayer services are based on this name. Because there's actually the Yud in the Torah, it's actually like this. There's a little point. So there's actually a little hidden fifth right there. You will find everything in Judaism, you will find over and over, you will find repeated 4 + 1. How many cups of wine are there in a Passover Seder? 4 + 1, right? 4 plus Elijah. How many questions are there in a Passover Seder? 4 + 1. The first one's, why is this night different from all the nights? How many sons in a Passover Seder? Right? The wise, the wicked, the simple, the one unable to inquire. But in traditional Haggadah, there's a blank space for the one who doesn't even know Passover exists. + 1. How many parts of the words? The Birkat HaShachar, the morning blessings, the Sukkah, the Shema blessings, the Amidah every day. But Monday, Thursday, Saturday, we had a Torah service. We find this whole thing a whole different way. We are people of the name more than we are of the book. Okay? You've all heard that we're born in the image of God, right? Made in the image of God. Does that mean God has a white beard and large nose? So the rabbi knows. So, right? Is that what it means? No. But if we take the Yud Hey Vav Hey and make it vertical, look what it looks like. Right? It looks like a human being, doesn't it? So come up here for a sec.
correct.
So the image of God is right here. Put your arms hang down. Because here's the Yud, here's the Hey. Put your arms hang down. Here's the Vav, and there's the Hey. Do you guys see that? That's how we're in the image of God. So we're going to study into that. Okay? A couple of other things that we're just sort of bouncing around before we do some looking at text. There it is. If you want to understand Judaism, this is the book. It was a pen that rolled up. This is a Siddur. This is the Orthodox work, again by Art Scroll. The prayer book that we use is based out of this. All Siddurim were based on this, whether we use it or not. Siddur was by 8th or 9th century, and is a reverse engineer the experience about that. You have everything's great. You have this actual experience. People get sacrifices. There's chanting. There's, like, have this trauma. You walk and it's great. You're literally goes into consciousness. Okay, literally what happens. We call it a heightened state of awareness. It's when meditation state. If the parasympathetic systems of the brain shut down, campus becomes more active. It happens through meditation. It happens all sorts of different experiences. Automatically, we walk into the temple because the order of sacrifice is the order of the service itself. Almost before order was created of prayers, if you really knew the prayers would take the participant and have experienced this people so many power. You can correlate this to God's name. Okay.
So was there an increase in literacy then, 800 years?
It's in the Gona period in the Saudi Peninsula. Yeah, there's great literacy there.
Okay, because you would have to have a vast congregation know how to read and write.
And you had people didn't necessarily, but the Gaons knew what they were doing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. So, let me see. Okay, so one more thing beforehand. When I say that this UK Bob plans insight, to give you an idea of how this class is going to, these series of classes are going to work. If you turn, I don't know the order of the pages that are done. Okay, if you turn to the page, okay, if you turn to the page that has God's name, it looks like a second from the end. This is the Yod, Hey, Vav, and Hey. Every letter in Judaism, in the Hebrew alphabet, has a numerical value. Right? 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, 4 is D, and so on. It's called gematria. And we understand that two things that have similar values, the same value, have similarities in their essence. So the numerical value of God's name is 26. Yod is the 10th letter, Hey is the 5th letter. And anytime I go too fast, because I go very quickly, just shout out or throw something at me. I'm used to it. So Yod is 10, Hey is 5, 6, Vav is 6, Hey is 5, equaling 26. So the name of God has a numerical value of 26. You all see that? Yes? Okay. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet, with the exception of 1, has a sound. Even Ein, in ancient Hebrew, was pronounced Oin, which is why we don't use it, because it would be Shema. Okay. It is. It was pronounced. The one letter that is not pronounced is Aleph. And Aleph looks like this. That letter right there is an Aleph. But we learn in Sefer Bahir, an over 2,000-year-old text, that you can take the letter Aleph and look at it differently. Not as just the Aleph, which would have a numerical value of 1, right? But you can say an Aleph is actually a Vav with 2 Yods. You all see that? You all see how that's the Vav is the long line, the Yod is the one that goes like this. You all see that? And look at it that way, as you will look on your handout. The numerical value becomes a Vav or a Yod, which is 10, a Yod, which is 10, and a Vav, which is 6. And this numerical value is 26. Yeah.
I don't know. You raised me. I'm so used to school.
It's raised, throw.
Why 26 and not? I feel like you could justify 18, but why 26?
Because you justify 18 because you learned it. You justify 18 as the number for life.
Yes.
Because that's what you learned.
Yeah.
Because no one bothered pointing out that God's name is 26. That's just the numerical value of the name, right? But here it takes all the letters and breaks them apart as to what they are. All equates to 26. And so the lesson in it is that you only really experience God in an inner silence. Make sense? Whether you're doing something or not, it's when your soul is really listening. Whole different way of looking at it, isn't it? So God doesn't shout, God whispers. So if we look at this name again, and now we look at the page before that, see that Aleph is also only silent letters a Yod and two Yods and a Vav. It's a lesson again that the silence is where we find God's meaning. Let's do a little study to start to understand. So, how many of you have seen one of these? If we were doing this in the class, which we would do, we would pass out Bibles to everyone. But in the very first line, it says, in the beginning, Bereshit. It says, in the beginning, and this is the best translation I know because it is straight from here. In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth. The earth was astonishing. Orlando, would you toss me a pair of glasses? Here, let me get them. It just sort of happens that as I get older, I don't know the English as well, and I need my glasses. I'm okay with the Hebrew. Okay, so it says, oh wow, print got so big. Miracle. In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered on the surface of the waters, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated between the light and the darkness. God called to the light day, and to the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, one day. Sound pretty familiar? That's about as good an interpretation or translation as you're going to get. But it's not in any way, shape, or complete. So let's look at it in Hebrew and translate it word by word. That's what I was doing on Rosh Hashanah. That's what I do. So, Bereshit. We're going to come back to this word Bereshit, but let me just tell you, it's not a real word. It's the only time it's used. Bereshit is not a real word. It is improper grammar. It is not an actual Hebrew word. We know it's like saying supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
So you don't see it in literature at any time.
You see people because they're using it based upon this, but it's not a real Hebrew word. Okay? So we're just going to say, for now, in the beginning. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, whatever it means, bara Elohim, God created et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, the heavens and the earth. Right? Her body language is like, I dare you to impress me, Rabbi. Okay, so Shemayim. How many of you can speak any Hebrew? Understand something? Okay.
Heavens.
That's normally what it's interpreted as, right? But let's split it apart because it's more than just heavens. Esh means fire. Mayim means
Water.
there's Shemayim. Gas and liquid. Okay, because fire is gas. So et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, God created gas, liquid, and substance. V'ha'aretz hayta tohu v'vohu, and this substance was all chaos and confusion. Right? Everyone with me? Hoshech al panei tahom, and there was a darkness on the face of the depths. V'ruach Elohim, and the spirit of God. Merachefet. Merachefet is a verb that in ancient Hebrew actually means to move very quickly until you make a spark. Okay? In modern Hebrew, there are some people who use the term merachefet back in the 50s and 60s as one of the terms to be making love. Okay? Because you're making a spark. Okay? Right? So the spirit of God, merachefet, moves very quickly until it makes a spark, al panei hamayim, on the face of the waters. V'yomer Elohim, and God said, Yor, there will be light, v'yor, and there was light. V'yora Elohim et ha'or, and God perceived the light. What's the word ki mean in Hebrew? Because. Right? And it doesn't say, and God saw the light and it was good. It says, V'yora Elohim, and God perceived et ha'or, the light, ki tov, because it was good. V'yavdel Elohim ben ha'or u'ben ha'choshech, and God separated between the light and between the darkness. V'ikra Elohim la'or. What's la mean when it says two? So it's not that God said that God called the light day. God called le'or, which means to the light, yom, day. And day. Ulachoshek, and to the darkness, kara laila, he called evening. He called to the darkness, he called night. Va'erev, va'evoker, yom echad. And there was evening and there was morning, day one. So, what do we learn from this? First of all, this is why our day begins at sunset, because their evening was created first. That's why our holidays begin at sunset. That's why it confuses all of the calendars. That's why. Okay, because our day starts at sunset.
Because that's how God.
Because God created evening. Okay.
That he did.
Never
Yeah,
knew.
you always think he created the sun, beginning at the sun.
No, we begin in the darkness, like we begin in the womb. We begin with our dreams so that we can manifest it during the sun. We are a moon people, not a sun people. Our calendar is based on the moon. We are a moon people. So, which is where love is, right? You don't go out to your sweetheart at 22 years old and say, "Hey, honey, let's go hang out in the sun because you look so beautiful." So let's go take a walk on the beach in the moon. So, what does this say? Let's translate it again. So let's really look what it. Now looking at each of those words, let's translate it as a paragraph without the Hebrew. When God created the gas and the liquid and the substance, and all there was chaos and confusion, and on the face of the depths. And the Spirit of God moved very quickly, creating a spark on the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw this light because it was good, and He separated between the light and between the darkness. And He called to the light day, and to the darkness He called night. And there was evening and there was morning. Day one. Kind of sounds like the Big Bang, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it the Big Bang? What's the Big Bang? There's chaos and confusion, and something happens, and there's a spark, and there's a bang, and then a light comes out of it. Isn't that what the Torah says? So when someone says, "Well, we know the Big Bang happened billions and billions of years ago," and they say, "So your Torah is hollow and empty and worthless." No, it's right there. And in fact, there was a man named Rabbi Isaac of Accra. He was blind. He was, I think, 10th century. He calculates the age of the universe based upon actual understanding of the different parts of the Bible, and he calculates the age. And in the 70s, MIT calculates the age of the universe from the Big Bang, and they're about 2% difference. And billions of years, that's a margin of error.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can even Wikipedia, and I'm not a huge Wikipedia guy, but you can Wikipedia Isaac of Accra. So it's a little more interesting now, isn't it, when you understand that the text is much deeper and is not a contradiction to what scientists say. They're just not as deep as we are. But it's actually a different language. Isn't that what they're doing? Okay. Let's look at this word, Bereishit. First word of the Torah. It's a word that does not make sense. It is not a real word. You may want a pen for this on your paper. Feel free. Here is Bereishit. And over each letter it says what the name of the letter is. Beit Resh Aleph Shin Yud Tav. Okay? So the rabbis ask the question, why does the Torah begin with the second letter of the alphabet, Bet? Why does it not begin with the first letter of the alphabet, Aleph? It's a legitimate question, right? If this is the blueprint of the universe. What's the last letter? We're going to come back to that question. What's the last letter of the Torah? Does anyone know? It's the Lamed, Yisrael. So the last letter is the Lamed. Now, if you take the last letter of the Torah and you take it to the first letter of the Torah, it spells the word Lev. Lev means heart. Okay, so, and we read Torah. We're going to do this in a week. On Simchas Torah, we read the last paragraph, and we roll it back up, and we immediately go to the front paragraph, right? Because it's the heart. The heart connects the Torah connects our heart. But what the rabbis say is, I want you to imagine the following. There is an Aleph hidden, I have in parentheses, between the Lamed and the Bet. An Aleph, a silent space in the center of your heart. Okay? That's a nice concept, isn't it? Now let's look at this word that makes no sense, except it's a map to manifest whatever you want in your life. Okay? It is a map of manifestation. If you take the first and the second, the last and the last letter, they spell the word beit or bayit, which means or container, because that's what a house is. Okay? It spells container. House. If you spell the first three letters, they spell a word. Bara, which means create. If you take the second and the third and the fourth letters, they spell the word rosh, which means the head or the mind. If you take the third and the fourth letters, they spell the word esh, which means fire or passion. If you take the third, the fourth, and the fifth letters, they spell the word ishi, which means my human being. And tov is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it always stands for Torah, which literally means guidelines. Now, why do I say this is a manifestation? This is a map of how God says we can all create in a divine way. First thing was we got to go to the silent place in the center of our heart, right? And then you create the container you want to create, and you create with your mind and your passion that which you are creating, and you give it guidelines to exist by. Let's say you want to create a symphony. You want to create a piece of music. Or you decide you want to create it because it's inside deep in your heart, right? Then you create it with you decide, okay, I'm going to create a container. It's going to be a symphony. It's going to be a string quartet. It's going to be whatever, the container that it is, the structure, the Succah, as it were. Then you're going to create it with both your intellect and your passion. And then once it's created, you're giving it guidelines to exist by. Isn't that how you create a symphony, a piece of art, or a baby? You're nodding your heads. That's a yes?
Oh, it's beautiful, yes. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
That's right there in the first word. Rashi, the great commentator Rashi, spends pages on just this word. As he says, it begs to be commented on. It begs to be explored and expounded upon. It doesn't mean...
commented before Rashi.
So what?
Before Rashi, people commented on
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's commentaries, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Abahir, Zohar, Talmud. This is... Because this word doesn't make sense. So when we kind of tie it together, we're saying creation is a whole different thing, and it comes from the silent place of the heart. And we know that Aleph also equates to God. Real creation comes because you have a desire to do it. If God planted that desire in the silent place in your heart, it's because you need to create it. Or at least go through that process. Whether it's a club for teenagers about Zionism, or whether it's a temple without dues. Right? God doesn't give us those dreams and those desires without understanding. Okay? How are we doing so far? How many of you have I lost? A little bit? Maybe a little bit or a lot of it? Okay, well, that's good. New is good. Lost is I want to go back. But let's now look at a couple of things, again, in text. And I think it's and I know this is a tremendous amount of information, but I think it's important. So we have these 7 days. And on the seventh day, God rests. And it actually says, Yom HaShvi'i Shabbat v'Nefash. It says that on the seventh day, Yom HaShvi'i, Shabbat. Now, Shabbat is to take the word, it means to rest it, but then so it's past tense of rested. But then it says, v'Nefash. Does anyone know what the word for soul is? Wait, I need her, Allison. Leave her alone. My wife's adopting someone back there.
You hear people use like neshama as the soul of the spirit.
Neshama means a soul. Nefesh is also a word for soul, right? Okay. Do you hear the similarities between nefash and nefesh? Okay. Nefesh is a noun. And what this, again, the only time we find this, is that the text takes the word soul, makes it into a verb, past tense. So it's not Yom HaShvi'i, on the seventh day God rested, and it literally is v'Nefash, means and God soul. Taking past the noun nefesh and making it into a past tense verb. In other words, on the seventh day, God gets a soul, and God needs us as much as we need God. God needs us to remember and protect the Sabbath. Does that make sense? So when we translate it as and God rested, v'Nefash, it means that God got a soul. God, it's a past. Does that make sense to everyone? Whole different take on Sabbath, isn't it? Okay, we're going to moving through a little bit more. I want to go through one more thing because I know this is a tremendous amount that I'm trying to also be conscious of. So let's look.
I think I missed something. You said God needs us.
Absolutely. So there's a beautiful midrash story going back thousands of years that God goes to create the heavens and the earth, and the angels say, and then everything's great, and then God's going to create human beings, and the angels say, "Don't do it. They're going to screw everything up." So angels have one leg. Why? because they know their purpose. They don't need to two-step. Right? And so they have one leg as the idea. That's why when we're in the Amidah, we pray like this. But the angels say, God, they're going to do bad things. And that's the point. Because we have free will and free choice, we can do good things too. So how many of us are parents? Okay, and there are many times in our children's lives, in our life, when let's just see, that was someone dying or sick. I always check text messages. Hold on a second. I should probably read that. Bear with me. Okay. So it's an amazing sense of what does it feed our souls when we give our children a choice, and this is the right choice and this is the wrong choice, and they do the right choice. One of the highest highs you get, isn't it? So how does God feel? So does that?
That makes sense.
Does God needs our love, because He loves us so much and He wants us to love back. He wants us to, just like we are with parents. So I say, Avinu Malkeinu, our beloved Father. So let's go to this idea of creation for a minute. How many of you have heard the story that Eve came from Adam's rib? Right? Which is why women are supposed to be subservient to men. You've heard that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They have an extra
Just a little.
That's why we have an extra rib too.
Okay. That is completely wrong according to Torah. Oh, all right. So what does it say? It's very confusing language when it's translated to the English, by the way. It's very confusing language, and we're going to see why it's so confusing. Let us make man, this is the English translation, man in our image after our likeness, they shall rule the fish and tree. So God created man in His image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. It's extremely confusing language at first, isn't it? It sounds like God did this. Now, by the way, this is one of the texts that's used in some Christian and Catholic theology of understanding the Trinity. Okay, but it still doesn't explain the female, and just doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, really listen to this, right? God created man in His image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Except that's not what it says. So here's the understanding of what it is. Can I borrow the two of you for a minute?
Sure.
In Hebrew, the prefix ha means the. Okay? So the word for bottle is bakbuk, one of my very favorite Hebrew words. And so how do we say the bottle? Ha bakbuk. Okay? The word for chair is kiseh. How do we say the chair? Ha kiseh. Right? The word for man is Adam. But the creature that's created here is called Ha-Adam, the human being. So let's look at Ha-Adam. Can I borrow the two of you? Male and female, He created them. This is let's looking at what He's saying. So we're going to try and parse it together, and this is something Jewish history and Jewish theology does, but is not done in other traditions in the same way. So it says here, God created man in His image. He created him, male and female, He created them. Right? But it's still talking about one being. Why? Because Adam, you could turn back to back. Come on here. Turn back to back. Come on, it's a little more. Back. You know each other. You can have your backs touched. Hey, nothing else. Not that kind of class. Ha-Adam looks like this. The human being. Male and female, He created them. The being. Does this make sense to everyone? Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, God's going to go sleep. Where are they connected? At the rib. They're going to separate because it's not good for the human being to be alone. And now, Chava and Adam. Adam and Eve. That just explained that whole weird language, did it?
Right. Yes.
Did you come from him? No.
No.
And Ha-Adam is not, thank you. And Ha-Adam, this creature, is not referred to again in the Torah after the separation.
So how did this whole rib thing come about? I'm curious.
Okay, so there's a great story that is, I say this all
Or
the
is it
time.
like a telephone thing?
It's better than that. There's a
I
great,
feel like it's bits of the Bible.
so there's a great story that a 9-year-old, I may have even told this at a tell it all the time because it's so true. A 9-year-old a rabbi walks into a village and he sees all these bullseyes with arrows, right in the center of the target. He says, "You have an amazing archer. Who's your archer?" They say, "Moishele, the 9-year-old." So he goes to Moishele, the 9-year-old. He says, "Moishele, did you do all these bullseyes?" Moishele says, "Yes, sir, I did." "That's fabulous. How'd you do it so good?" Moishele says, "It's really easy. I shoot an arrow and then I draw a target." So here you and I are talking. Not you and I. Mr. Polonia's brother are talking however long ago, whether it was a day ago, a decade ago, a century ago, a millennia ago, whatever. And we really want to show that women should do whatever we tell them. So you know what? We're going to use this and say women came from men. Does that make sense? People say things from agenda. How many of you heard that Judaism is pro-choice? It's not. How many of you heard that Judaism is pro-life? It's not. We'll get to it. Because I actually have a book got one coming out.
Did an Orthodox rabbi agree with your analysis?
Yes, about abortion?
No. About the Adam
Absolutely.
and Eve. The Adam and Eve.
Yeah, if they actually knew, if they'd ever studied this part. But to understand
that.
that, just because, so this is not to put down anyone. Everyone has their own purpose in what they do. Okay? 2 Jews equals 3 opinions, 4 rabbis, and 5 temples. Okay, or 4 temples and 5 rabbis, depending on how big they are. So we need to remember that, and we say "elu ve'elu." These words and these words are both words of the living God. Okay. There's a difference, and we're going to get to it, between Ashkenazi and Sephardic traditions. Ashkenazi traditions, or observant Ashkenazi traditions, very much are come out of 17th, 18th, 19th, early 20th century Eastern Europe, 16th to an extent. Okay, that's where they come out of. We take on the qualities and the habits of where we assimilate. It's good, but we do. Who's running 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century Eastern Europe? Catholicism. Okay, that's who's running. In Catholicism, the archetype of a woman is the Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene, the virgin or the prostitute. Ours, it's Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, Deborah, Miriam, etc. These amazing, strong, real human beings. So much of what people think of as observant Judaism as orthodoxy, it comes out of Eastern European Catholicism. And sadly, most of those people who are practicing don't even know that's where it comes from.
Don't even know what.
They don't even know that's where it comes from. How many of you have been in an Orthodox here? She sneezes on the truth, as my grandma would have said. How many of you have heard that in the Orthodox world, a woman's supposed to walk behind a man? You ever heard that? It says in the Talmud that a man should not walk behind a woman, because if he does, he's going to be looking at her tochas and not thinking about what he's supposed to be thinking about. Okay? Does that mean she needs to walk behind me? First of all, I think it's kind of insulting to my tochas. But beyond that, so there. But it's true. If I'm walking behind Allison, sweetheart, you there?
You're looking at her.
No, she'll tell you a story from the very first time that she'll tell you.
Is this the wedding story?
No, this is when are you there? Okay, never mind. She will tell you that she knew on our first date. I was looking at her toes. She'll tell you that point blank. Okay? Look, she married me. I'm proof that I'm smarter than she is. She got stuck with me. I married her cat. Okay? But so the idea is we should walk together, right? but because of Catholicism, it became subservient. Remember, in Catholicism, God is male. Now, here's another piece about Yud-Hey Vav-Hey.
Excuse me, Rabbi,
Yeah.
but the Jews were so isolated. How did the Catholicism?
We're isolated in everything, but we still get influence.
So the part
So
about
they
the
still
red-
made that
Sorry.
that much of an impact on us.
Huge impact. So, by the way, just so you understand this name of God, you're going to love this part. So you never know where class is going to go, and that's why I so like studying. So if you look at this name, okay, I'm going to give you a whole other taking on this name. You're going to love this, maybe. If you look at this name, in Hebrew, who speaks another language? Who speaks any other language? What language do you speak?
English.
Okay, in Farsi, do you conjugate words differently?
Yeah.
Based on, so there's a root, and you conjugate a future tense, past tense, male, female, etc. Right? You
Same
speak
thing with Spanish.
same in Spanish, same in Hebrew.
Right.
The root is called a shoresh. Okay? The root of this word, whoa! I knew it wasn't going to make it at some point. Keep it going. Stay. Oh, wait. Oh, Orlando, this is falling. Oh, okay, hold on. Orlando, I'm going to need, Orlando saves everything. I know that goes in there somewhere, but I know he'll save me. He always saves me. Thank God for him. Okay, so let's move over a little bit to you.
Rabbi Allison said there's a Judah. I'm freezing.
Allison, we can. No, is the heater? The heater's there. There's one right there. If you want to put it by Pat. Okay, so
Really share it.
it's okay. All right, now
I'm not using it.
okay.
I brought it just.
All right, let's go back. So if you take this word Yud Hey Vav Hey, the shoresh, the root of this word are these two letters, the Hey and the Vav, okay? Which literally are the root of a verb. These two letters, the root of the verb lihio, which means to be, to exist. Okay, you with me?
Yep.
All right. If you take any word and you add a yud in front of it, it makes future tense masculine.
Okay.
So to speak is meber, but if I want to say he will speak, I say yedaber. Okay? Masculine, future. If you take a hey and you put it at the back of a word, it makes it past tense feminine. Right? Basically.
Okay.
Which means our name for God is the simultaneous conjugation of the verb to be or to exist in masculine and feminine, in future and in past. God's name is literally masculine, feminine, future, past, present. That's if you just want to look at it linguistically. That cool? Okay? So we don't have this, we don't have the same issues. We look at partnership. We don't look at it as anything. In the spiritual world, pretty much everything that's holy is feminine. Even the words themselves, grammatically, are feminine. Shabbat, mezuzah, sukkah, menorah, Torah, these are all feminine words. Because feminine physicality is much, we recognize, is much more conscious of God by virtue of the fact that every month of an adult woman's life, she experiences death and the potential for birth. Okay? And I don't care how hard I try, I'm not going to experience that the same way. So we don't have that same take of subjugation of feminine. Okay? But we were influenced greatly by, so when people talk about orthodoxy, because that's where we start with this, there's a lot of influence from other places. Moreover, it's a different focus with the vast majority of observant. When you think of Chabad, there's, and look, that's one of the men who ordained me. He founded the first Chabad house in the country, Schwartzy. Okay. Though, bless you. Yeah, she's sneezing on the truth. Chabad was great knowledge. Today you can become a Chabad rabbi. I think it only is a year long. Maybe it's 2. You need to know how to study. You need to know how to daven. People like Sapo or Danny Yiftach, you know, the Father Kunin. These are men with knowledge. Not necessarily true. Just because someone's observant does not make them knowledgeable, right?
Right.
So
Do you have a ponytail there? Just wondering.
I do.
Oh, you can't tell.
Yes, you can't really tell if I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's at his 70th birthday. So a lot of the influence, when you say what an Orthodox rabbi, the question isn't whether Orthodox or conservative or Reform rabbi, because remember those are just distinctions. Rabbi Shulchan has a great term. He likes to say, that there's this whole category of Jews that are non-practicing Orthodox Jews. Maybe they don't wrap tefillin every day.
From CDK Shomei Torah, Eli Shuckett, or is
Rabbi Shulchan is a dear friend and teacher.
it lovely man?
Rabbi Shulchan is a witness on my ketubah and was my dissertation advisor.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
He actually,
That's really
he has not spoken publicly very long to me. He actually came and spoke at our temple last year.
That was really good.
Yes, he's a dear friend who I love.
He's
If I could be 1/1000th of the rabbi of this man, by the time I die, I would consider myself a success. Okay, he is an amazing, amazing man. He's a witness on my ketubah, and he was my dissertation advisor. That tells you the love I have for him.
We grew, our kids
Okay.
grew up with him. We know.
Yeah, that's strong. So he likes to say there's non-practicing Orthodox. Your soul, your teachings, your learning is the Orthodox learning, but that doesn't mean you daven 3 times a day. Okay. So the Hebrew says what the Hebrew says. Great example. A number of years ago, I'm asked to be one of the keynote speakers on the federal building on a rally for Israel. And there are all these young Chabad rabbis hanging out. I don't know if I told this story or not, because I never remember when I tell it, because I write things down. They're wrapping tefillin. And one of my students from LMU that had been a student was there with his mom and some friends. He goes, "Rabbi, will you wrap tefillin with me?" And I said, "It's not my tefillin, but of course." So we go over to this young Chabad rabbi, who maybe he's got hair under his arms, maybe not, I'm not sure. He's that young. And I say, can I wrap the tefillin? And here's my card. And he goes, "This is my rabbi." He goes, "Yeah, absolutely, sir." So I wrap the tefillin with Jonathan, and I come back, and his mother, who is in her, at the time, 50s, so she's past the age of menstruation, and she goes, and she's Persian, and she says, "Rabbi, I want to wrap tefillin." Please don't do this to me. Please. I want to wrap tefillin. You're my rabbi. I want to wrap tefillin. You have to help me wrap tefillin. Okay. So I go back to the guy. I say, "This is Jonathan's mom, and she would like to wrap tefillin. May we borrow your tefillin so she can wrap them?" Now, if he'd been smart, he would have said, "I'm not comfortable with that." End of conversation. This Schmendrick says, "Well, women are forbidden from wrapping tefillin." To which I said, "Really? Where?" He goes, "They're forbidden." Really? I don't claim to know every word of Torah. But where does it say that? They're not obligated, but where does it say they're forbidden? And she's clearly past the age of nidah. She's not on her menstrual cycle right now, which would be a reason not to wrap them. So where does it say that? He goes, "Well, my rabbi, my teacher." I said, "Great. Here's my card. I'll buy you and your wife and your rabbi and his family dinner at Pat's, which is a very expensive, overpriced kosher restaurant in the city, when you can show me where it says in the Torah that they can't wrap. I can show you where it says we're all commanded to. I can show you that they're exempt. Women are exempt from that commandment, but you tell me where it says they cannot and they're forbidden." I never got a phone.
Saved a lot of money.
I wasn't worried about the bet.
Well, it's all the interpretation. Exempt
What's the
from,
custom?
somebody interpreted
Huh?
it as they can't,
They can't.
which,
I'm sorry about what?
No, same thing.
It's so.
yeah.
So when you say, what does someone say? Again, the Sephardim are not influenced in the same way by the church as the Ashkenazi are, the Eastern European, and these are the Iberian Peninsula, and Arab and Iran and Spain. And so,
Why not? Spain was,
but no, they're not influenced in the same way as you get down into the Iberian Peninsula. The Sephardim are there. So what ends up happening? They are, over here, women are supposed to shave their head and wear a wig and not be attractive to anyone. Why? Over here, they say that's ridiculous. Have you ever been to a Persian wedding? Okay, they'll be as attractive as they possibly can, right? Okay, and they're not showing their beautiful long hair as they're dancing like this, right? You guys know the classic. You know what I think this is, by the way? This is from the dowry ceremony that happens earlier.
Oh.
And it's, "Look at my new rings, look at my new watch."
That's insane.
That's what I think it is, because I've been to those and they're very
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's insane.
So the point is that would a Sephardic, you asked the question, would an Orthodox rabbi say the same thing? Would a Sephardic rabbi say the same thing? Would an Ashkenazi rabbi say the same thing? We're making distinctions that aren't necessarily there. There's a synagogue in the city. It is fabulous Sephardic synagogue, but they have no clue what they're doing because they can't identify, are they more observant, are they less observant there? Because some of them are doing Ashkenazi practice, and they've had problems for years as a result. We're traditional Sephardic. Well, what's traditional Sephardic mean?
Can you give an example of an issue?
An issue or practice, which we'd rather. Can a woman be on a bima?
Depends who you ask. Okay, I understand.
Okay. Can a woman be on a bima? Well, in the Talmud, it says what a woman can and cannot wear when she is reading Torah publicly. This would imply that a woman can read Torah publicly in those days, wouldn't it? Okay. Abortion, whole different dialogue. So you go and you listen to when the recent decision came out last year, Dobbs, right? It was Dobbs, right?
Mhm.
And you listen to these sermons from rabbis. You find them online, and you find one Reform rabbi and one usually conservative as well, but every of these Reform rabbis are getting up and saying it says that abortion is allowed. And it says that because it's considered it's only about the mother's rights. We know this because if you buy a cow and its calf is pregnant, you get the calf. Okay, and it's very clear. It even says that in the Talmud, it says that a woman is that the fetus is considered a limb of the mother. Right, and it says that if you kill someone, it's a capital crime. But if you injure a pregnant woman and she loses the baby, it's a tort crime. This all proves to us Judaism is pro-choice. End of report. And this is infringing on our rights in Judaism to do it. Anyone hear that kind of stuff? Okay. Okay. Now you go listen to the Orthodox rabbi. You know, God plants in us. We have no right to ever defame our body. The baby has a soul. You cannot commit abortion. It is not yours. It is God's right. Ever heard that kind of argument? Okay. Neither of them are the traditional Jewish argument.
But I mean,
There's let me tell you the real argument is, 'cause I think you came to the class once. Judaism is Talmud speaks specifically about abortion extensively. Okay, you think this is an issue today?
No,
It's always been an issue. So it speaks about it extensively. And it is true. It says very specifically that the baby, the fetus, is considered a limb of the mother because it says there are things we know and things that are unknown and unknowable. We cannot know when the soul comes into the fetus. There's the argument that happens at conception, it happens at 30 days, at 40 days, at 90 days, at birth. Okay, but we know that at the time of birth, or when the crown, at 36 weeks, when the crown of the head has been revealed, we know that that is a life form on itself and it has a soul. We do not make law choices based upon what we do not know and cannot be known. So we're not going to argue about anything with regarding to the fetus before 36 weeks. At that point, we know it's a real body, it's a real being, it has its own ability to sustain. Before 36 weeks, we consider it a limb of the mother as a result. That's why. But in Judaism, can you tattoo?
No.
Okay. In Judaism, if a person goes into a doctor, forget about Judaism, just in general, a guy goes into the doctor and says, you know, my arm's fat, cut it off. If the doctor did it, I don't know the way it looks. If the doctor did it, he'd be arrested, and the patient would go into an insane asylum, wouldn't he? Right? Yes, it's considered a limb of the mother, but you don't get to cut off your leg because you don't like the way it looks. Do you understand now? Which means abortion is forbidden from day one because it's a limit of the mother. Except, right? There's this thing called a rodef. A rodef is a pursuer. A rodef is the term of rodef is a legal term of someone who's pursuing someone else with the agenda to kill them. Okay, the idea of the image is taken if we see someone chasing someone else with a knife, saying, "I'm going to kill you." We have an obligation to stop the rodef by whatever means necessary. Okay, that's the term that's used. Rodef, it means pursuer. If the baby, the fetus, is pursuing the mother's life as a rodef, putting the mother's life at risk, can you do an abortion? Yes or no?
Yeah, I guess so. I have
How late can you do it? Can you only do it in the first trimester?
no
Up
idea.
to 35 weeks by your definition, because
Exactly.
we don't know
Up
what-
until the 36 weeks. Exactly. So on the one hand, we're more conservative than the most conservative typical Christian pro-life, and we're more liberal than than many of the pro-choice. But it has to be wrote if. Now you get to another question. What if it's not? We know that the emotions and our mental and emotional state affect our body. So, what if, God forbid, a young girl is raped, incest, God forbid, and she's pregnant? Is the baby a rodef? Okay,
Should
because
be, but-
because
It should be, doesn't mean
Wait.
it is.
is it a rodef? Because it will so affect her mental emotional state it will kill her. Or she will be so devastated she will kill herself from drug addiction or anything else. Right? God forbid any of those things. That is another question that needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
And who evaluates that?
Ideally, wise rabbis.
So this young girl has to go to a rabbi and let the rabbi
That's
make
one
a
of the
decision
it would be a
about
based in. It would be three
I'm
rabbis.
sorry. I'm
No, but it would,
baked in.
it
Okay,
would
right,
be three.
right. Okay.
Ideally, it would be three men of compassion and wisdom who keep it very private and keep it, have a conversation. And that conversation may happen many times.
And I find it very interesting. I mean, as a independent female, that
Well, he said
would
you weren't
have
so
to go-
independent, but
I know we're insecure, but I would,
As soon
but
as
I
you
would have,
split
but
apart.
I would have to go to, like my child would have to go to if I was observant to that
But
level.
that's not the way it has been for 2,000 years. Okay, it's inconsequential. You go to someone who understands. You go to a psychologist. You go to whomever, because
Okay,
the
so
rabbis
doesn't-
today are not necessarily qualified to do that.
Right.
Okay,
I mean, spiritually, or literally,
but you understand the point. You're going to
yeah.
someone to identify them, just like you go to a medical doctor. You're going to a psychological
So,
doctor.
Rabbi, again, I didn't go to all the shuls when this happened, but all these different shuls, they were really going one way or the other? They weren't. Because when I learned Jewish medical ethics, maybe these were different people. It was like Rabbi Ellison, Elliot Dorff. They sort of said it the same way as you.
That's because Dorff is a brilliant man.
That they explained it. Like, you decide for your. This is sort of what the evidence is, and it's again just like everything else. It's a case by case basis, and
I didn't come up with this, right? I didn't just make this up. This is
no,
how.
but I would hope that there would be other synagogues that would say, "Look, we have this Supreme Court decision.
But
We're not
most
going
of
to get into politics, but this is what Judaism says." And
but most of those rabbis, interestingly, aren't on pulpits. I don't know if Dorff is. I don't think he is.
right.
Okay, they're
Okay.
absolutely he's right.
Because Dorff would say, "This is the evidence."
He'd say here's the argument. It's all the women's rights, but with rights come responsibilities. I've never heard him talk about it, but I'm sure he'd say the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this isn't new information. This is thousands of years old, and we got lots of commentaries for 1,000 years. They're very clear. But how many of you knew that was the argument?
I didn't know that it was even
Discussed.
discussed.
Oh, okay. So let's go for a few more things just to give you some things to understand. What's discussed in the Talmud? There's a class I teach every year and a half. I will not teach it to women because it's marital intimacy in the Talmud. It makes the Kama Sutra look like a children's kindergarten book. Let me rephrase that because of kindergarten books today. Like a kindergarten book 40 years ago. Okay? Right? That literally, I will not teach it to women. It's inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
Yes, it's inappropriate. It's not appropriate for me to teach to women. It's just not. And it's a bad career move. I don't need some woman saying, guess what I learned about, but I like from Rabbi Barclay. So I teach it only to men. And then often I get, we do a Talmud tobacco class, and often we'll have guys, and they go home frisky, and then I'll get an email from a wife, thank you so much for class last night. Like, I guess they came home and said, look what I got to try. It's in the Talmud. Right? So, in the Talmud. Birth control in the Talmud. After morning birth control tea in the Talmud.
Tea.
Okay? There's more in the Talmud, and you knew Talmud had laws and stories. It is the essence. It is everything. It takes everything in the Torah and takes it even deeper. It's the oral law. And we're going to get to that in a number of weeks to understand, because Talmud really is amazing. Great, look, my first serious Talmud teacher was Rabbi Shulchan. So, I have a whole different, who I'd come up with an idea, and I'd say, Michael, it's a very interesting idea. I'd like you to write a 5 to 10 page paper on it. Okay, I have great love. So this is, I want you guys to kind of understand what's going on here. There's so much more to Judaism than people think of, and then that we learn. We grew up at 7 years old, at 10 years old, going to religious school, or we heard about wherever, and we weren't taught the essence of things. So I'm going to end this a little bit with one other thing, because we should, because of the time of year.
No, I'm good.
So
I just brought that in case.
we talk about in the Siddur, and we talk about that every Jewish practice and holiday comes out of this holiday of Sukkot. And yet, if you didn't grow up observant, this is just Gilligan's Island.
Hmm.
Right?
I just never knew that everything came from Sukkot.
Everything does. It's one of the few. There's only 20-some commandments in Torah that we can keep exactly as it was kept years ago. Now, Sukkah, skach is the word for palm frond, and you can use mats or wreaths as well. And what makes a kosher Sukkah kosher is you need to have more on top. You have enough on top so that in the midday sun there's more shade than sun, and in the evening you can see the stars. When I was however young, I was in a sukkah and I loved it so much, and so I took up the habit. And so whenever possible, we try and have the walls being palm fronds as well, because I just think it's beautiful. Let's look at a couple of basic, quick teachings on it. As beautiful it is as it is, when it starts, it becomes worn and tired by the end of the week. The physical world is temporal. The spiritual world is permanent. Part of the teaching. Part of the teaching of, and you can pull every holiday from here, every practice, but part of the teaching of, being able to, what the sun means, what the stars mean, what the shade means, all of this. Part of the teachings of making separation. It's in the sukkah, what's not, things like that. All sorts of different laws. Everything comes out of the sukkah. But it says in the Siddur, it talks about, it actually literally says, may it be counted as if we observe the festival, the holiday, the commandment of Sukkot, and all of the 613 mitzvot that come out of it. That's literally what is said in the Sukkah, in the prayer. Okay? For those of you who were not here the other night, I will actually quote it to you. So in the Siddur, I need my glasses again. English. In the Siddur, it literally says, of course I have to find it, but that's a whole other conversation. Okay, so we'll just use this because it says it here as well, I think. So this is the prayer when someone's reading, when we do the four species, the Lulav and Etrog, it literally says, and listen to this, that the letters of your unified name become close to one another. What do you think the letters are? Yud, He, Vav, and He. This is direct quoting out of it. To make known that your name is called upon me. May this mitzvah be reckoned before you as if I fulfilled it with all its particulars, roots, and the 613 mitzvos depended upon it. That's what it says. Remember I said the skeleton key is what? God's name, right?
Yep.
If you want, you can Google an article I wrote 30 years ago, 25 years ago on the four species and on the Native American Chinoopa. They use this exact same way. Medicine plant. Female, masculine. You guys can all see that. I don't have to go into any deep explanations about that, right? Everyone's with me on that, right? No one's thinking this is the female, this is the masculine. And what happens? They get unified. How many letters in God's name?
4 plus 1.
1, 2, 3, 4. Where's the +1?
You.
When did it come from?
Smart.
Okay, when we use it. And our reminder, because when we make it, think about what happens when we make it, right? When we say the blessing, which way is the pitum pointing? You.
Toward your heart.
You. Right? We are exactly the hidden fifth. And then when we're done, we go out into the world with the spear that shows us that we've been judged favorably. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you see how this is the key? And this is why I spend so much time discussing it always in this first class of the series, because most of us, Bob, you think you're alone in not knowing why we say Hashem or Adonai? How many of you understood why we said Hashem or Adonai?
No.
This is new information, right?
It's not the way I learned it. I just learned that was the prayer version for God's name. But nobody explained it ever deeper.
This is what, and if you
No, I
look,
don't need where Jehovah came up. Why is it Yahweh?
Yahweh.
Like I couldn't understand. Like what am I reading?
now you know why and why we say Hashem.
Because there is no pronoun. There is no.
Right.
There is a meditation we will get to when we get to mysticism. There's a meditation. It's a very powerful meditation, and it involves the 4 letters with every permutation of the vowels. So it actually is Yaha, Waha, Yaha, Waha, Yehe, Wehe, Yeha, Weha, Yeha, Waha, Yihi, Wuhi, Wihi, Yoho, Woho, Yi, You, Hu, Woo, Hu, You, Woo, Hu, Woo, 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 Woo. It actually is, and you spend 30 seconds on each sound. So it's Ya, and you do that and then Ha. We'll get to that. So the 21st Yehud. So it's all there. See, what I want to just point out tonight is it's all hidden in plain sight. And the sad part is that pretty much the majority of places that teach it aren't teaching it. Majority of places that know it aren't teaching it, unless you know and you're fluent in Hebrew and everything else. Or they don't know because they don't teach this stuff in rabbinics. Sadly,
do
I think
not.
they should know.
No, they don't.
So
Why?
they should. That's a different question. And there are things you don't teach this, you teach this to a 7-year-old, they're not going to get it. So you just say, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created. Okay? But if you don't spend some dialogue, you miss it. So what other questions are there? Okay, so next week we will be in the synagogue again. It will be warm
Yeah.
and comfy.
Okay.
And we have
It's tough.
Wednesday night, we have Talmud tobacco and tequila tasting.
Oh, tequila this time.
Tequila tasting. So we have all 3. Talmud tobacco.
you
Instead of
don't
T
have
T squared, it's T cubed.
But we don't have the pizza from Stonehouse, so should we bring pizza?
We'll get some pizzas or
Oh, I
something.
can
We'll
bring
figure something. So Talmud tobacco. What food begins with a T?
Papa.
Tacos.
Tacos.
Sounds way better than-
Tacos. See, we should figure out how to get some kosher tacos. Maybe we'll make or something. That's it. That's it. So then we can add a 4th T. Friday night we have Shabbat again, a potluck Shabbat dinner.
Is that here or in
here.
the temple?
No, it's still here. And then Sunday night we're doing some class tour at the temple. And then Monday night we will be back here, or not here, but at the temple, doing class. So what do you guys think of this? Interesting?
Yes.
Very,
Really yes.
very.
New stuff? New information? You're a Jewish
Yes.
professional. So,
Yeah. But yes.
it's
and a different,
important.
explanation of things that were just
But it's right there.
right. Well, but I've never read that because I don't read Hebrew.
And therein lies the challenge, right, that people have. So people are
I'm
teaching this, they're
excited about
teaching it in
this.
Hebrew.
And if we miss a class, it's being recorded.
We are
so we'll
recording
be
it for
able
people
to-
who are out of the area.
Right. So we'll
So
be
they
able
can-
to catch
That
it.
we're catching, yeah, we are, we're tweeting. I don't know, did we get many people watching it?
Monday night, 7:30 at Temple.
Next Monday night,
And
7:30.
what's Sunday, Rabbi?
Sunday night is at the temple is Simchat Torah. We get to dance with the Torah.
I'm going Saturday at time with a friend.
Monday.
Um,
Sunday.
Sunday, what time?
Orlando?
Isn't everything 7:30?
7:30 at the
Yeah,
Temple.
we start back to 7:30. Yeah, it's fine. So hopefully that helps. And one of the things that we're going to do is just, we will have books. If you have a Bible that is a Tanakh, please bring it with you to class. It can help a lot, although we do have it at the temple as well. And again, the goal is just to learn. Because here's another little piece to leave with, and why learning is sacred, and why it's so important. Okay, the Hebrew so in Hebrew, this is the line, and the letters hang from the line, or they go above the line, or they they're hanging from the line when you're drawing. Okay, one letter goes above the line, through it, and below it. And that's the letter Lamed, which is actually a word. Lamed means to study and to learn, to teach and to learn. And so when we're doing this, it is a holy activity. It is one of the activities that we are taught in the Talmud. We gain benefit from studying like we have tonight in this world and in the next. It's one of the few activities that you get both. So it's a really sacred thing to do and a lot of fun. So thank you for doing this. And I'll see you, God willing, on Wednesday night and or Friday night and or Sunday night and or
So Friday here, Sunday, and
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys, thank you so much.